The alarm screamed through USP Lee like a wounded animal. Red lights flashed down the long concrete hallway as guards shouted and ran. Somewhere behind a steel door, a man lay bleeding on the cold floor, his life slipping away. Inmates pressed their faces to the bars, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Some prayed. Some smiled. Some stayed very still, knowing that even breathing wrong could make them next. This was not a riot. This was not an accident. This was a murder. And everyone inside USP Lee knew exactly why it happened. As officers rushed toward the unit, a single word moved quietly from cell to cell, whispered through vents and cracks in the walls like a dark secret. Gangs. The body had not even been removed yet, but the prison was already changing. Doors slammed shut. Lockdowns were called. Phones went dead. And deep inside the prison, powerful men who never touched the weapon were already deciding what would happen next. Because at USP Lee, the killing was not the end. It was the beginning. And no one, not the inmates, not the guards, knew how bad it was about to get. Weeks earlier, USP Lee looked calm from the outside. The prison sat in the mountains of Virginia, quiet and gray, surrounded by trees and fences topped with razor wire. To people driving past, it looked like any other high-security prison. Strong walls. Guard towers. Order. But inside, order was only an illusion. USP Lee was a United States penitentiary that held some of the most dangerous inmates in the country. Men with long sentences. Men with nothing to lose. Many of them belonged to gangs that were older, stronger, and more organized than some street gangs outside. Inside these walls, gangs were not just groups. They were governments. They decided who could sit at a table, who could walk freely, who could use the phone, and who could stay alive. Every morning started the same way. Loud doors opened. Count was taken. Inmates lined up for breakfast. Plastic trays slid across metal counters. The food was plain. The room was loud. But everyone watched everything. Where you sat mattered. Who you looked at mattered. Even how long you stood in line mattered. New inmates learned quickly. Sit with your people. Do not stare. Do not ask questions. Do not act brave. And most important of all, do not cross a gang line. Marcus Hill learned this the hard way. Marcus was not a gang leader. He was not famous. He was not feared. He was serving a long sentence for armed robbery and had been moved to USP Lee after problems at another prison. He was tall, quiet, and tried to stay invisible. In a place like USP Lee, invisibility felt like safety. Marcus kept his head down. He worked in the kitchen. He read books. He wrote letters to his mother. He followed rules that were not written anywhere but were known by everyone. But USP Lee did not reward quiet men. It tested them. One afternoon, during a routine movement back from work detail, Marcus made a mistake that would cost him everything. He stepped into the wrong line at the wrong time. It was small. It lasted only seconds. But the men watching noticed. The gang that controlled that area noticed. Later that night, Marcus felt the shift. The air changed. Conversation stopped when he walked by. Eyes followed him. Not angry. Not loud. Just cold. He knew what it meant. Word traveled fast in USP Lee. Faster than guards. Faster than cameras. Faster than rules. Somewhere in the housing unit, men were talking about him, judging him, deciding if he was a problem. And problems at USP Lee were never handled peacefully. Life inside the prison followed a strange rhythm. Days were long and boring. Weeks felt the same. Nothing happened, and then everything happened at once. Guards were always short-staffed. Everyone knew it. Fewer officers meant fewer eyes. Fewer eyes meant gangs had more room to move. Officers tried their best, but fear followed them too. Some guards were new. Some were tired. Some counted the days until retirement. They all knew one truth: when gangs decided something would happen, stopping it was almost impossible. At night, the prison sounded different. The clanging stopped. The yelling faded. What remained was whispering through vents, coded knocks on walls, and quiet footsteps during movements that were supposed to be silent. Marcus stopped sleeping well. He felt watched even when he was alone in his cell. He started skipping meals. He avoided common areas. He thought if he stayed small enough, the storm would pass. But storms at USP Lee did not pass. They hit. The tension inside the prison grew week by week. A fight broke out in the yard. Then another in the showers. Weapons were found during shakedowns, small blades made from metal scraps, toothbrushes sharpened into knives. Each incident led to lockdowns. Each lockdown made things worse. Inmates got angrier. Gangs blamed each other. Guards grew stricter. Rumors spread about a bigger move coming, something planned, something violent. No one knew exactly when. Only that it was close. Then, on a quiet morning, Marcus was told to report to another unit for a temporary reassignment. His stomach dropped. Temporary moves were dangerous. They broke routines. They forced inmates into new spaces, new rules, new enemies. Marcus wanted to refuse, but refusing orders was not an option. As he walked down the long hallway, chains rattling at his waist, he felt like prey walking into a dark forest. The new unit felt heavier. The noise was lower. The stairs were sharper. That was when he saw him. Derek Cole. Everyone knew Derek. He was not the loudest man in USP Lee, but he was one of the most feared. He did not need to raise his voice. Others did it for him. Derek's gang controlled large parts of the prison. They handled drugs, protection, and punishment. If someone crossed them, consequences followed. Permanent ones. Marcus looked away, but it was too late. Derek smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a happy one. A knowing one. That night, Marcus wrote a letter to his mother. He did not tell her what was wrong. He just told her he loved her and hoped she was healthy. Letters like that were common in USP Lee. Too common. The next day started normally. Count. Breakfast. Movement. Then it happened. In the chaos of a crowded hallway, when guards were distracted and bodies were packed tight, the attack came fast. A sharp pain. A shove. A flash of metal. Marcus fell. Inmates scattered. Someone screamed. Blood spread across the floor. By the time guards pushed through, it was over. The alarm sounded. The prison locked down. And Marcus Hill was dead. That was the moment everything exploded. Because Marcus was not just an inmate. He was a message. The murder sent shockwaves through USP Lee. Gangs went silent, then loud. Blame moved quickly. Threats followed. Guards were put on edge. The administration knew retaliation was coming. They just did not know where. Or how big. As officers searched cells and questioned inmates, the gang leaders stayed calm. They had planned for this. They knew the rules of chaos. When one man fell, another move followed. And somewhere deep inside the prison, plans were already in motion for something far worse than a single killing. As night fell over USP Lee, the lights dimmed, but no one slept. Because everyone knew the truth. The murder of Marcus Hill was only the spark. And the fire was about to spread. The prison stayed locked down for 3 days after Marcus Hill was killed. 3 long days where doors stayed shut, lights stayed on, and nerves stayed tight. Meals were pushed through slots. Showers were cancelled. Phones were silent. Men were trapped in small concrete boxes with their thoughts, their fears, and their anger. In places like USP Lee, lockdowns did not bring peace. They brought pressure. Guards walked the tiers slowly, hands near their radios, eyes scanning faces through narrow windows. Some inmates shouted insults. Others stayed quiet, listening. Everyone knew that silence often meant planning. Marcus's name spread through the prison like smoke. Some inmates felt bad for him. Others said he should have known better. A few said nothing at all, because saying the wrong thing could get you killed. In the shadows of the units, gang leaders talked in low voices. They did not argue about whether the murder was justified. That question had already been answered. They argued about what came next. Because a killing inside USP Lee never stood alone. It demanded balance. Derek Cole sat on his bunk, calm as ever. He read a paperback book while others spoke for him. He knew the administration was watching him closely now. He also knew they could not prove anything. That was the power he held. Guards suspected him. Inmates feared him. But suspicion was not enough to lock a man away forever. Inside USP Lee, power was not taken by force alone. It was taken by patience. When the lockdown finally lifted, the prison felt different. Quieter. Not safer, just quieter. Inmates returned to the yard, but they walked in tight groups. Eyes stayed low. Conversations were short. Every movement felt watched, measured, judged. The gangs had drawn new lines. Crossing them would be deadly. Officer James Walker noticed the change immediately. He had worked at USP Lee for 8 years. He had seen fights, stabbings, and riots. But this felt worse. This felt organized. Walker and the other officers were exhausted. Staff shortages meant longer shifts and fewer breaks. Some officers worked doubles. Some worked on days they were supposed to be home. Mistakes were easier to make when you were tired. And mistakes inside USP Lee could cost lives. During a routine search, officers found a weapon hidden behind a sink. Then another taped under a table. Then another buried in a trash bag in the yard. The weapons were crude but deadly. Someone was preparing. The administration ordered more searches. More lockdowns. More restrictions. But pressure only made the gangs angrier. Inside one housing unit, a younger inmate named Kevin Brooks tried to stay out of the trouble. Kevin was only 22. He had been sentenced for drug charges and had never planned to join a gang. But USP Lee did not care about plans. It cared about survival. Kevin was approached in the day room by two older inmates. They did not threaten him. They did not shout. They offered protection. Protection always came with a price. Kevin knew saying no could be dangerous. Saying yes would change his life forever. He asked for time to think. They smiled and walked away. That night, someone slipped a note under his door. You don't have much time. Fear wrapped around Kevin like a blanket he could not remove. Stories like Kevin's played out all over USP Lee. Neutral inmates were being forced to choose sides. Gangs were growing stronger, not weaker. And at the center of it all was Marcus's murder, still fresh, still unanswered. Then came the first retaliation. It happened in the showers. Water masked the sound. Steam hid the movement. When guards responded to a call, they found another inmate down, badly injured but alive. He belonged to a rival group. The message was clear. The balance was shifting. Lockdowns returned. Tension climbed higher. Rumors spread that a full-scale attack was coming, something big enough to change everything. Officer Walker tried to warn his supervisors. He told them the signs were there. He told them the gangs were coordinating. But warnings inside prisons often came too late. One evening, during dinner movement, the lights flickered. For just a second. That was all it took. A fight broke out near the serving line. Then another near the exit. Trays flew. Shouts filled the room. Guards rushed in, radio screaming. Then steel flashed. Multiple weapons appeared at once, like they had been waiting for a signal. Inmates ran. Some hid. Others attacked. Chaos exploded across the dining hall. Officer Walker tackled one inmate to the ground. Another officer was knocked back, hitting the floor hard. Blood stained the tiles. Alarms blared. Backup rushed in, but the damage was already done. By the time order was restored, several inmates were hurt, and one officer was taken out on a stretcher. USP Lee went into full emergency lockdown. The warden knew now. This was no longer about one murder. This was about control. As inmates were locked back into their cells, Derek Cole sat quietly, listening to the alarms fade. His face showed no emotion. But inside his unit, something else was happening. A door that should have been locked stayed open just a little too long. And in that brief moment, a group of inmates moved exactly as planned, heading toward a target that would push USP Lee into its darkest chapter yet. The cameras caught only shadows. And by the time guards realized what was happening, it was already too late.